Welcome to the Storytellers, the radio show and podcast that features those who choose to leave their mark on the world through the art of story. I'm your host, Grace Sammon. I look forward to our time together today. Now, let's meet our storyteller.
Kristin Owens, Ph.D., is an award-winning faculty member with over 25 years of university experience. Now a full-time writer in steamy Southwest Florida, Kristin has over 100 bylines to her name. She has such amazing stories and articles in celebrated magazines such as Writer's Digest and Wine Enthusiasts. She holds certificates with the Court of Master Sommeliers and Cicerone and travels the world writing about wonderful wines, beautiful beers, and surprising spirits. She speaks fluent German and crappy French, and today she is going to talk to us about all of that, including her wonderful debut novel, which is called Elizabeth Sails. Kristin, welcome to the Storyteller's microphone.
My goodness, thank you so much for having me. I sound impressive.
You are very impressive. And I want to start out with some of the fun stuff. Why cruise ships and why so much wine?
Well, I have
why
to
not?
say, why not? Right, great. I have to say, it really all kind of started when my husband and I lived in Europe. And he is a retired Air Force officer. And we didn't meet till we were probably 36. So we each had our own careers. And like you said, I was in university administration for a very long time. But then when they moved us to Germany, I kind of had to stop my profession because it's kind of difficult to get an admin position in another country, even when you can speak part of the language. They just have a different university system. So I started doing some teaching and we started drinking because you're in Europe. And
Why not?
For the both of us, not growing up with, alcohol education, having that wine, having that beer, it is just inspiring to go overseas and learn that it is really part of their culture. And so we really dove into it. My husband is now a certified beer judge, which is incredible. And I talk about wine because I was just so inspired by Italy and France and Germany and all those wonderful countries that has history with wine. So on that note, when we had to move back to the United States, we found out from one of my husband's NATO colleagues that the best way to get back to the United States from Europe was taking the Queen Mary 2. And we said, what is that? And we learned very quickly that it's the most beautiful ocean liner, one of the few, if not the only one left in the entire world that will transport you back from London, Southampton area, or Hamburg to New York. And it takes about a week. So there's no jet lag. They feed you, they take care of you. And it was incredible. And it was a life-changing experience.
And there was wine involved.
Of course there's wine. Of course there was wine. When I came back to the United States, I really started studying wine professionally and got to know a lot about, we moved to Colorado, got to know about the AVAs there and all the wonderful small vintners that are doing amazing work in Colorado. And I just started writing about it in local magazines and then got picked up by national magazines. So yeah, it is very much part of my life and part of my work. But of course, in anything I write fiction-wise, there's always wine inside the book.
Well, I had the delightful pleasure of reading Elizabeth Sails as an ARC, as an advanced reader copy. I enjoyed every moment of it. Tell us about Elizabeth Sails.
Well, thank you for that. You're one of the few people that have been able to read it prior to it going on for sale, and it does come out October 8th. So like you said, you had an advanced review copy, and what that means is it goes out to people who are influential in the publishing business, who work for magazines and newspapers, who curate lists and want to give some really great reviews or blurbs. So we appreciate you reading. But Elizabeth Sails really stems from my first experience with Kennard, and that was that crossing on Queen Mary 2. I would say I'm a pretty confident person and an extrovert, but once I got on that ship, it was a completely different world, one that I was not used to. I was very middle class, and just the luxury and the menus and the food and the staff and the service was beyond anything I'd ever expected or experienced. And my husband as well. So we really, the two of us felt like, should we be here? Are we fish out of water? And I have to say, I always thought if I was to write a book, I would want to have that main character have that experience. Like, I don't think I should be here. And how does she get through that voyage? And so Elizabeth, the main character, is very much an opposite of me. She's very introverted. She does not leave her apartment, and she's being forced to go on this journey on a luxury cruise ship. In this case, it is the Queen Elizabeth, one of Kennard's 4 ships. And she's doing it out of love for her family. And it's a scavenger hunt. So I really wanted to, like all authors, we want to read something that we can write and read, this vice versa. What was out there for me that was a scavenger hunt that did involve a romance, that there were no kids involved, and there really wasn't anything. So I decided to write about it. And that is my first novel. And she's so much fun. And I think we all have a little bit of Elizabeth in us somewhere. And so we can relate to a lot of what she goes through.
I totally agree with you. And I would say that not only does she present differently than you do, as you're so outgoing, but she's actually agoraphobic, actually, right? She doesn't leave her apartment hardly at all.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
so
And
her
there's
character arc.
Yeah.
Go ahead, please.
No, that's something that is on her list. She's got a list of things that she will not do. And that list just kept getting bigger and bigger. And not to put any spoilers out there, but those behind the scenes are trying to help her reduce that list.
I loved the character arc. We talk in fiction, and certainly specifically in women's fiction, we talk about the character arc being so important. And Elizabeth does this just delightful development as she goes through this scavenger hunt, which I thought was one of the most fun elements in the entire book. Because sometimes I went, oh, I know what it is. I know what it is. I know where she needs to go. And other times I didn't have a clue.
Mm-hmm.
So how did you decide to tuck that piece in?
Well, I find them fascinating. I love clues. I love having to find something, especially when you're in a city. It gets you to look at areas that you normally wouldn't go to. So for instance, my husband and I used to do geocaching a long time ago. And basically they're little treasures hidden everywhere in the world. Mm-hmm. And you have an app on your phone and you go and find them. And we found it to be a lot of, just talk about the experience. We went to places we never thought we'd go to. And here we are looking for this little tiny thing in a lamppost somewhere. And when we found it, it was like, we won $1 million. It was so exciting. Right. And just the conquest of it. And I thought, wouldn't it be fun to have a book where she is basically on her own trying to do this, and it's not just for fun, but there was reasons why that she needs to be successful. And every clue and every action she needs to do forces her to check something off that list. And in the end, she really has this amazing arc because she knew she could do it all the time. She just wasn't pushed to do it. And she pushed herself to do it. So thank you for that.
Well, I like the way that you have multiple levels, if you will, in Elizabeth Sales, because I think it could be broadly categorized perhaps as a cozy mystery. Is that the mm-hmm. genre you would tuck it into?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, actually, I think, my agent had a really tough time trying to figure out where we were going to put this. And because if you read it, it could be really all kinds of different things. And my publisher, Rising Action, has said that it could go into cozy mystery because there's really no murder. And if there's a death, it's off the page per se. And it's somebody who's not a sleuth or a professional detective trying to solve a puzzle. So it can be a cozy, but I think at the heart of it is really what we call women's fiction, which is a journey of self-discovery. And literally, she is on a voyage of self-discovery. So those are probably the two categories I would put it in, as well as single women, no kids, and I think that's about it.
Travel and adventure.
Travel and adventure, absolutely.
So I thought it was multifaceted, and I also love the way it ends because it's a sequel. There will be sequels.
I hope so. I actually have I'm waiting on some responses, but there is a second book, and it has to do with her sister, Victoria, who is mentioned in Elizabeth's book. And the two books are actually happening simultaneously. So one doesn't happen after the other. You can read either at the same time and experience what the two women are going through. So we're waiting to hear news on that.
Well, fingers crossed, because I
Thank you.
loved Elizabeth. You're welcome. I loved Elizabeth Sales. Let's jump. You just mentioned your agent. So many authors are agented today. Many authors are not. Could you talk a little bit about your path to having an agent and your experience with that?
Sure. Like every new writer, like every writer, you start off not knowing anything. And you spend a lot of time, or you should be spending a lot of time, learning not just about the craft, but about the profession. And I was lucky enough to have a really wonderful local writing organization when I was in Colorado. At the time, it was called Northern Colorado Writers, that did conferences and workshops. And I learned a lot, especially from the people who came in as speakers and presenters. And the two right off the top of my head that I can think of are Jessica Strausser, who was at the time the editor for Writer's Digest, and Chuck Wendig, who's a New York Times bestseller now. So this was 10 years ago, and it goes by fast. So I started writing about 2014, and I started doing a lot of education and craft and reaching out and educating myself. I also started with a critique group that was instrumental in Elizabeth Sales. And it took about 2 years to write the book because I was focusing more on shorter magazine articles. And my critique group kept saying, you need to write bigger. You need to write like a book. And I thought, I don't know if I can do that. But they really pushed me into doing it. So after I wrote the book, I thought, well, let's see if it has any merit in terms of the traditional publishing journey. And I started querying agents. And I signed 2 years later with Madeline Bird at Stone Song. And that's 2 years of very, very, very dedicated querying. And that is a long time.
It's a long journey. So
it's a long journey. And it was so nerve rattling and just really damaging to your psyche that I thought if I ever got an agent and I ever got a book deal, I'm going to put together a class on this. And so I have. My background's in education. I love to teach. And I'm actually doing a class as we speak on querying because it's just so important. And it's not, if you ever go to a writing conference and they say, oh, come an hour early, you can do that master class and you'll have your query letter. You're not going to. It's a very long process to get that letter together and to get an agent to want to read your work. So 2 years for me. And then it took 2 years to sell the book. And once we sold the book, it's going to take 2 years before that book comes out. So we're talking about 8 solid years, 10 years from the beginning.
And I think that's such an important thing as people are listening to our show today and thinking about writing with the multiple paths to writing. You can do the really fast path, you can do the slower path, and each of them are differently valued now as well. But I think the importance of your candor is critical to those who are thinking about writing, about the entire process. I coach a lot of writers at the moment, and I tell them the same thing, that if you want to go traditional press, agented, you are looking about 6 years, 8 years even perhaps. And certainly there are shorter jump streets, but we have to be, I think those of us who write have to be in this for the long haul to be able to see our works come to fruition. I loved that you said you love to teach you and I come out of a teaching background. We both come out of a
Yes.
university background. We both have our writing background. We've both been teaching various aspects of reading, writing, publishing, marketing, etc. But I love that you are continuing to teach, and you're very eclectic. You have taught everything from your current work of writing, publishing, to ballroom dancing and statistics.
Yes.
You can't help yourself, can you, Kristin?
I can't. Well, here's the thing. I was a dancer way back when, and I needed some extra money. I was young and I was in my 20s, and I was teaching. I was actually at the University of Penn State University, and I needed some extra money, and the ballroom dance craze had started. And this is back in the 90s. And I was able to teach. So I've taught ballroom dancing to 18-year-olds that wound up getting married. I've taught at elder hostels. I have, and then once we got to Colorado, I was starting to teach statistics because I hate statistics. Everybody hates statistics. And it really, really depends on your instructor to make it fun. So I would bring in decks of cards, dice, and it would be like Vegas night in my classroom. And the dean would walk by and go, "What is she doing?" But I can guarantee you, they all had a good time and they all passed. So yeah, background in teaching is really important. I found it to be really instrumental in lots of the things that I'm doing now. Even though I'm a writer, I now present and teach on cruise ships. So it's been terrific. It's been a skill set that I'm able to bring forward in this career. And I think that's the thing that a lot of us forget is that, well, I'm not a writer. I do this or I've done that before. You have skills that you can move forward in your writing career. Definitely.
And I think so much of women of a certain age that, we are constantly reinventing ourselves, constantly looking at, who we are now in a changing world and changing relationships. And one of those things I think about is some people think they have to throw that baby out with the bathwater, that they don't remember all the skill sets that they bring. So I love that you did that. I also love that you just alluded to some of the teaching you're doing on the cruise ship. So you're continuing to travel. And I would tell you that I can't wait to someday be on one of the Cunard ships. First of all, you do a beautiful job representing Cunard, even though that's not your job or your mission. But I feel very at home, and I know the places I will get scared on the ship and the places where I know I can go for help on the ship. But tell us about your recent teaching on your last transatlantic voyage.
Well, thank you. I have to say, I want to make I want to go back just a little bit what you said about the different paths to publication. And I think that one of the most important things as a writer is you have to set what your goal is. And if your goal is to be a published writer, kind of unpack that. And what does that really mean to you? Is it that you want to sell your work? Because that's what a published writer does. If you just want to write a book, just write a book. You don't have to publish it. Write a book and pass it around to your friends and family. So make sure you know what your goals are before you decide what path you want to take. Because just like you said, it could take 8 to 10 years to get there if you really want that product that's going to sell. So kind of connected to your last question, when I knew I was writing about a cruise ship and I knew it was going to be on Cunard, I started working with Cunard way back then to let them know what I was doing. I sent their corporate people an email. Hey, I was so inspired by this ship that I actually wrote a book about it. And I just wanted your permission to use the ship's likeness and the name of the ship in some of the lounges in the book. And they wrote back and they said, "That's wonderful. Great." That email was 8 years old. And so I had that email just in case. And so just in case. And so once the book got sold, I've been able to maintain a dialogue with them because I've established a relationship with them. Hey, guess what? The book sold. We're very excited. It's going to be on October 8th, 2024. Isn't that wonderful? We're very excited. And I've been looking forward to being on the ship again. Now, I've been on Cunard 12 times since as a passenger. And I've seen the lectures given. And I have seen their entertainment and their, they call them insight lectures. And I know I can do that. So I started the process of getting a talent agent and who would put me on ships. Now, Cunard didn't take me 2 years ago when I started this. again, just like a new writer, I have to get experience. So I did experience on smaller ships, more general ships, to be able to build up a portfolio. And I talk about wine and I talk about writing. So 2 years later, I'm doing world cruises for Viking, which is wonderful. And I just passed my audition with Cunard. And it was terrific because it was a face-to-face with London with 4 of their executives. And then they asked me to be on a ship as a live audition. And we just got back from that, and it went very, very well. And I found out last week that I'm booked on 5 more voyages for 2025. So again, it's about relationship building. And because I'm kind of associated with the corporate brand now, I want to be a full partner, and I want to be a ready partner that is now able to bring books on the ship to sell, is now in discussion with the bookstores on the ship and the gift shops to have that book permanently there. And hopefully if another book comes out, the same will happen. So it is a long process, but a good one.
It's a fascinating look into not only the cruise ship world, the wine world, but the behind the scenes of what it takes to get your book published, out there, marketed, and to continue to use this skill set. Kristin Owens, I'm so delighted that you wrote Elizabeth Sales. I look for many more books from you. And thank you for being on the Storytellers.
Thank you so much, Grace.
This has been a copyrighted episode of The Storytellers by Grace Sammon and Authors on the Air, Global Radio Network. Thanks for being with us.
That concludes this episode of The Storytellers. I'm so glad you could be part of the story today. I hope you share the stories, tell your own, and come back for another episode, because when our stories are told, everything changes. I'm Grace Sammon.